o'clock, so we will make a start. Thank you for making the earlier time. First of all, agenda item 1 is apologies and name substitutes.
Apologies from Councillors Dan Birch, Councillor Sam Bastow, and name substitutes are Councillor Seb James for Councillor Dan Birch, Councillor Bill Hopkins for Councillor Sam Bastow.
Thank you very much indeed. Agenda item 2, are there any declaration of interest in any of party whip at all? No, in which case we'll move on to agenda item 3, which is public participation.
No, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Agenda item 4 is to confirm the minutes of our last meeting, which was held on the 15th of July. Is everyone content that I sign those as a true and accurate record? Yes. Thank you very much indeed. I'll take that as agreed. So, without further ado, the first substantive item on the agenda this afternoon, which we asked for to go onto the work programme, is tourism, and I'm very pleased to welcome Lorna Robinson and Gary Woodman to the meeting. Who's going to kick off? Lorna's going to go straight in. So, Lorna, over to you. Would you like questions at the end, or okay?
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for inviting Visit Worcestershire to present our tourism report this afternoon. Just to run through some of the headline points of the paper that I put forward. Visit Worcestershire came back into the County Council in April 2020 at the start of the COVID pandemic, after it being a private organisation to run for the previous time before that. Since then, we've really focused on supporting the local businesses. Obviously, post-COVID was a very difficult time for the visitor economy, and we've gone from strength to strength with those businesses, developing quite a large network of businesses post-COVID. Following the 2022 government review, the Dubois review, Visit England decided to create what they call the Premier League of destination management organisations, or in their words, ALVEPs, so local visitor economy partnerships. We were one of the first 20 areas to be accepted onto that programme, so there's 38 in total now from where there was about 200 before COVID. So we're operating with the formal Visit England accreditation. One of the parts of that accreditation was we needed a destination management plan, which was written during 2023 and passed at Cabinet in the December of 23, and we've been working on that for the last 2 years. So we're coming up to that 2-year stage, so it's a really great time to be brought back into Scrutiny to go through our progress on that to date. So the sort of headline successes, that destination management plan had 3 overall objectives. One around the Worcestershire experience, was a lot around working with businesses and how residents and visitors feel when they're in the county. One around the brand and raising the perception of Worcestershire as a holiday destination. And finally, one around the Worcestershire welcome, which was around accessibility, but also about being investment ready for new opportunities. All of those 3 objectives built into our overarching aim to be a £1.7 billion visitor economy by 2028. A couple of the KPIs that lead into that, so I wanted to bring your attention to the number of stays. We wanted to increase the number of people staying in the county by 10% by 2028, and I'm very delighted to say that we've already increased that number by 12% in the last 2 years. So we've had an increase to 1.26 million people staying in the county, but that links to that number of stays. It's not just the number of trips, the number of nights they're staying has also increased to 3.7 nights. Now, this is against a national backdrop of a minus 10% decrease in overnight stays. So the county really is pulling its weight for that sort of staycation market, and we've seen that boom increase ever since COVID, and we really are riding on a wave with our overnight stays. Alongside that, we wanted to increase visitor spend by 10%, and again, I'm delighted to announce that that's now at £780 million annually, so that's a total increase in 20.1% in the last 2 years. So visitors are not only coming to the county, they're staying longer and spending more, which was at the heart of what our destination management plan said, because that's sort of the heart of a sustainable visit. Visitor satisfaction, we'd never done this study before, so we set a baseline for this back in 2023. We found that 91% of visitors were very satisfied with their stay in the county and 95% would stay again. Obviously, it's quite difficult to improve upon that. There's also a very high stat already. So we're looking to maintain that level of visitor satisfaction, and we'll be revisiting that data set next year. Equally, another data set we're revisiting next year is the propensity to visit, which is an annoying word to say, but it's basically about the brand perception of Worcestershire. And we know from our previous research that only about 18% of the people we spoke to had heard about Worcestershire until you started pulling out things like Worcester sauce, the cricket, the Malvern Hills. But once people understood what the county had to offer, about 84% of respondents were interested in visiting. So we're trying to shift that needle, increase that propensity to visit, but also that brand perception of the county. And we'll be doing that again in 2026. We had a target to support 400 businesses. Now, since Visit Worcestershire was back in the hands of the County Council, we've supported 743 businesses, with 318 of those being since we started our new destination management plan. So a lot of businesses have benefited from support. We've also got 14 new products to market that we've worked on with these businesses. And this is an intensive programme of work where we've worked with them to bring new products to market, but also help them get them into market. So our collaboration with Fire Harbour, who links into Get Your Guide, which you might have bought holiday products from yourself. Overall, I'm really excited about this one. Our overall measure of success for tourism was getting to that £1 billion visitor economy target. And I'm absolutely delighted that the first time in Worcestershire's history we have reached that £1 billion target. Not just met it, we're now at 1.5 billion. So we've exceeded that target 2 years early. So we will be looking at how we can develop that target and maybe stretch that target a little bit and grow the sector even wider. But that really is an impressive target to hit, given the cost of living crisis and lots of the things that have been impacting the wider tourism sector. So we're absolutely delighted that Worcestershire is really flying the flag for tourism in the country and is held up as best practice with Visit England against a drop in lots of other areas. So I think you can take confidence that the sector is showing resilience, it's steady growth, and I think with Visit Worcestershire and the ALVET board, which is a board of private sector tourism businesses who work alongside us, we really are working hard with the tourist industry at the forefront of what we're trying to do. A couple of key focus for the next 12 months. So hopefully you might have seen that we've launched our new heritage campaign. This is something that I've been particularly passionate about since I've taken over tourism. People kept saying, what is Worcestershire's hook? We're not Shakespeare's county. And we've almost got loads and loads and loads of things that we can hang our hat on. So this heritage campaign is taking 4 key themes and trying to link a lot of our heritage stories together for residents and for visitors alike. So for that sort of local pride in the heritage and the history that we've got here, but also to encourage people to visit. So we've done a couple of tongue-in-cheek videos that you might have seen that we launched last week. We've done a PR stunt in Westminster to showcase the history of democracy and its links into the county. And we're delighted with how that's been received so far, but there's lots more coming. So if you don't follow us on social media already, please do, because you'll be seeing those stories coming out. And I think it's really great for members in the room to be leaning into those stories and showcasing them when they link to their areas as well, for that sort of residential pride. And those 4 key themes are around royals and rebels, democracy, the creatives, and the Industrial Revolution. So it really encapsulates the whole county's history. We've also got Taste Worcestershire, which is launching this Friday at the Three Counties Showground. That is our second year we've done a county-wide food and drink sort of celebration where we celebrate the county's flavour. We've been working a lot with producers and making sure that we're on the map for the quality of the food and drink that we produce here, but also getting people into hospitality businesses in October, which is a bit of a shoulder season for the sector. So people are trying places they've not been to before. So if you haven't already, you can download your free golden ticket and get yourselves out with take your partner out, go out with some mates, try somewhere different during the month of October, and take your Worcestershire pass so you get a good discount. A couple of other things I wanted to flag with Scrutiny whilst I'm here. We're doing a lot of work about taking Worcestershire to the world, which is linking to a Visit England programme around the travel trade and really working with international buyers to get people here. We've got quite a lot of early success with that because of how close the south of the county is to the Cotswolds. We're seeing a lot of groups bypassing the now sort of busy honeypot sites of the Cotswolds and coming into Worcestershire instead. So I can keep you abreast of that, but I'm really pleased with how the travel trade work is going. And we've got a number of other Meet the Buyer events planned for the 4th quarter of the year. A couple of other things that I'd like to pull out is the Warm Worcestershire Welcome, which is around accessibility. We're about to launch our 2nd accessibility programme, in October, which is mainly focused around accommodation businesses. We know that people with disabilities, they still like to go on holiday. It's a £15 billion market in its own right, and we've been working with businesses so they can try and take a share of that. Not only important as an ageing demographic for the people who live in the county, but also those visitors who might want to visit us who have additional needs. So our accessibility programme has been massively successful before. We've been held up as best practice nationally for that programme, and we're delighted that it's starting again in the next month. Just finally, I wanted to talk about the Tourism Awards, which is taking place in March. Our judges are currently out at the moment, and this is a really huge celebration of the sector. It's taking place on the 21st of March at the Three Counties Showground. This will be our 4th year, I think, of running the Tourism Awards. And again, Dominique, who works on that programme for us, is on the national panel because of how well our awards are regarded nationally. So we'll have 15 winners on the night. They all go through to the national finals. Last year we had 2 winners in the national finals. So we had a Abbott's Grange, which is in Broadway, which is a beautiful boutique B&B. And we also had Andrew Hurley, who was a volunteer at Avencroft Museum. So they both went to the national final. So great showcase of Worcestershire nationally. And fingers crossed we get the same again this year. But it's just a really great opportunity if any of those businesses are in your patch to sort of say well done and showcase them. But equally, this time next year when we're looking for applications, to push those out through your networks. I think that's a very brief overview from me. I'd be delighted to take questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Lorna. Who'd like to... Councillor Price, your hand was up first, and then Councillor McSweeney.
Thank you, Chair. We talk about visitor spend being around about 780 million, and then the value of tourism being 1.5 billion. We don't really talk about the indirect areas in regards to indirect impacts like supply chains, farmers supplying food, hotels, etc., etc. Do we have an indication of what those figures would be in terms of the value of tourism in Worcestershire?
Yeah, so the £1 billion figure takes in some indirect, so like second homes, boat hire, some of the things outside of the usual tourism. But you're right, it's probably not taken into account that that sort of multiplier effect of the supply chains. That isn't a piece of work I've seen another destination do, but I can take that back to Visit England to see if they've got any idea of if they've ever done that calculation themselves. So that's something we could work on collectively as an LVEP network and then report that back.
Councillor McSweeney.
Yeah, sorry, it's just a little detail. Bottom of page 4, overall measure of success, value of tourism. It says value of tourism increased from 939 million and 962 million to 1.5 billion. It suggests that's a 9% increase. So there is one of those figures is wrong there, it strikes me.
It's 9.9 to 962.
So 962 to 1.5 billion is a lot more than not more than a 9% increase.
Sorry, that should be 1.05 billion. That's a typo on my end.
Councillor James.
Fab, thank you, Chair. I suppose just to dig in, and it sort of across page 4 and onto a bit of page 5. Data suggests that sort of pubs and hospitality are closing every day. We lose a pub a day, and since the budget, we've lost 84,000 jobs in hospitality. Is there a particular focus on what we can do? Because I have tried nearly every pub in Worcester, I hope, but they do close, and I do think a key part of this is the food and drink sector. So is there a bit of a ring-fence strategy just for food and drink to see what more we could be doing?
I'm glad to hear that you're also helping the local economy, which I'm also doing as well, across the county. The Taste Worcestershire campaign came about because of that very concern about local pubs and eateries, and they are, struggling the most with the cost of living crisis, if we're being honest, and the increased prices and national insurance, as you've raised. And unfortunately, sometimes they do close, but the ones that we're working with at the moment, we are seeing there's definite peaks and troughs in the year. Sometimes they're having great successes, and other months they're struggling to keep the lights on. And we've got a consultancy programme that's working with hospitality businesses. So they get 7 hours of free support where they can come and pick the brains of a local tourism consultant and help try and put strategies in place for that. I say Taste Worcestershire is a massive spotlight on that. We've had over 1,000 people download the Taste campaign voucher already, and we're not even live yet. It launches next week. So we're doing what we can. I take your point that we've probably be looking at it in a little bit of a deeper dive, and I'll take that back to the LVET board when they meet in October to see if there's anything they want to do around that.
I did, Chair, thank you.
Councillor
Yeah, thank you for a report, and absolutely delighted we're improving and things going forward. Really delighted to see Taste Worcestershire, that celebration, and also the new heritage campaigns. They're brilliant, and going forward with that is great, so keep that rolled out. It wouldn't be me if I didn't drill down a bit into some of the other issues. One is just very disappointed the Cabinet member for Business and Skills isn't here to go through and listen to our scrutiny and audit. Very disappointed with that, and I'd like that to be noted. Thank you. More importantly, going on to page 2 at point 8, about the support of the DMP and the LVEP advisory groups, and they've been established. Are Bromsgrove plugged into this? Because it doesn't quite mention them in here, and I just wonder, is the first question they plugged in. And then going on to page 3, particularly on numbers of staying guests and visitor spend, is it possible to see a breakdown by districts on that? Because I can see it, but I can't quite get a handle for my area, so I know what's going on and I know what to do in our area. So it'd be nice to see a breakdown of districts in that. And again, at page 5, it's nice to see a breakdown of those, point 6 overall measures, again by district, you'd see. And then just a thought on page 4, on the analysis. It's nice to see an analysis and awareness, etc. So how will we do this? It's nice to see the analysis, but I'm not quite sure how we're going to do it and roll it out. It'd be nice to see that if we could. And then finally, if you want to come back, Chair, page 7, under a warm welcome for all, about improving accessibility. I've got a major issue with that in our area, and I'm quite happy to raise it later, Chair, if you wish, or now. I'm quite happy to do that, but the answer to the question first, and we go on to that final point later.
Let's pick up those points first of all, and then you can raise Arthurchurch Station as well to get it over and done with now.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I just want to assure you that all 6 of the district councils are plugged into the work we do. So we have a district partnership group which meets every other month with representative from across all of the district councils. And then they have nominated one representative, which currently is Malvern Hills District Council, to represent them at the LVET board. So she does a very good job of pulling all of that information together. I will say in Bromsgrove there isn't a tourism officer, so it sort of bounces around between economic development and sort of the cultural compact and then the town centre manager. So there isn't somebody who necessarily holds it completely as a piece of feedback, but we are trying to work with all 3 of those officers to make sure that they're across what we're doing. Similarly, with the economic impact report that we received, the county one came out first, and that was with us in time for the deadline for this meeting. The districts usually all get their own data as well. I think Bromsgrove and Redditch were looking at whether they were going to do that this year. I'm not sure if you've got an update on that, Gary, but if there is one, I can plug that data into you, but I know districts were getting it at different times depending on when they'd commission the report. So we get an overarching one, and it's up to them to get their individual ones underneath that. I know some of the districts have them, but I can check in with Bromsgrove and Redditch and see where they are with that.
That's fine, yeah.
Did you also ask about the station element?
Fine, thank you, Chair. Just regarding page 7 and the accessibility, improving accessibility has got to be at the forefront of our work, and certainly over the last 2 years supporting 20 businesses. At Old Church, we have a particular issue with accessibility, in particular in line with our station. We were upgraded to 2 lines and 2 platforms 12, 13 years ago. We had lifts installed, and the lifts don't really work. They've been out of action for over 6 months. And they're now been fixed, but they keep breaking down. The result of that is that passengers who want to go north towards Birmingham, if they've got if they've got disability or people with disabilities and people with pushchairs, they can't get over to the northbound platform because there's no facility. I've put together a plan to look at putting a footpath in to get from the road into the northbound platform to improve accessibility for all. I'll put that together, I'll put it to Network Rail, and I've costed it at 50,000. Network Rail is saying that, well, we're short of funds, but we'd like funding. Could you look at any other ways of funding it? This was before I was a county councillor, so I looked at the district to do that. It seems that there was a bit of a de-scoping of the station, because I think Worcestershire County Council at the time it's being put together were partners, and I think that footpath was then missed off. So we need to think, and if the committee panel here could recommend to Cabinet that we actually look at improving accessibility for all, and particularly at Old Church Station, to get that footpath put in so we do have accessibility, because at the moment, as I said, the only way of going northbound is to get on a southbound train, start changing stations and getting back on a northbound. If you turn up, the lifts aren't working, you've got an appointment in Birmingham, by the time you've done it, you've missed your appointment. So to me, that's totally unsatisfactory. So I'd like us to consider that and support going to Cabinet for that, Chair, if we could, and have monies. I'm happy to put some of my divisional fund into that, because I think it's important and the residents keep raising it. And more importantly, and I think we'll come on to it later, that I'm just surprised to see a press release being put out about Old Church Station accessibility being pulled. I've not even seen accessibility funding for it, and I'm deeply upset that I've been informed, because I'm right next to Redditch Station. That Redditch Station is now being pulled from anything, and first I read was in the press, and I think, Chair, that is not acceptable, and it's disgraceful that I can learn through that, and I'm getting questions from my residents about what the hell's going on, because if it's not improved at Redditch Station, they're going to drive to Old Church and park at our station. So I'm pretty concerned with that. So if we could, that will be raised later, I think, through budgets, but I'd just like to give put down on record my disappointment that I've learnt about rail infrastructure projects and accessibility projects in my division without being told first and hearing it firsthand from the press. We're getting this all the time, and I'm embarrassed when my residents ask me to say, as your county councillor, I know nothing. So just some thoughts there, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Lorna, anything you'd like to say at all, or Gary, in terms of perhaps what the county council can do to
I think we'll take it away. We'll obviously have a conversation with the ward member and with West Midlands Rail, and obviously Cabinet member. Obviously looking at if there are facilities like lifts that are not working, then let's get those, work out why those are not working and how we can make that happen. But we'll take that away and have a look.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chair.
Yeah.
Come back. Are you going to sit down with me and so you find out what's going on, and all the conversations I've had with Network Rail, because it's Network Rail, not West Midlands Train, where the issue is. West Midlands Train are losing passage and they're on board with this, but I'm just surprised that I've got an answer coming back to me that says, well, we'll think about it. Are you going to come and talk to us and get this resolved?
The answer wasn't we'll think about it. The answer was we will pick this up as an issue outside the meeting.
Okay, point taken.
Thank you. Right, let's move on to Councillor Edmonds.
Good afternoon. Just a simple question, really. You talk about direct marketing, etc. One of the things that I see very often now with the TV in particular, to highlight an area, is, if you like, the sponsorship of certain serialisations or dramas or documentaries. And that seems to have done a lot, really, for the Dales, for Cotswolds. Is that something you're looking at as well?
We have done TV advertising, so we've used Sky Ad Smart and recently ITVX, and what that does is it puts the first advert on, and you can really hone in on your consumer base. So if I want affluent families within 2 hours of Worcestershire, I can target that group of people, and they will see that before they get the main advertising. We had some real wins with ITVX last year because they hit all of the Celebrity Big Brother programmes, and then they also hit I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. So without having to pay for that sponsorship, we got Worcestershire into those messagings. We're planning to do more ITVX advertising next March, April time around our heritage campaign. We haven't got the budget to go for a full-scale sponsorship of a TV programme, but we've found that we've kind of, within our budget, slotted ourselves into some of those peak times.
Thank you for that. It's good to hear a heartening story, really. Yeah.
Good. Councillor Allen.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Looking at page 8, the panel is asked to consider and comment on the information provided and determine whether any further information is provided. And really what I would like to know is there a way we can drill down into the future to find out which area or certainly which town or towns are struggling the most? Because you're presenting quite a rosy picture, but I suspect that picture is rosy for some areas and not so rosy for others. So is there a way we can tell how one particular town is doing or one particular area? Thank you.
I think once we're able to get the economic impact for all of the district areas, we might not be able to get down to a town level, but we'll have that area to a district area, so we can see if tourism is growing in all of those areas, or whether, you know, say, I know Broadway is having a real influx at the moment, whether that's sort of propping up the figures for somewhere like, you know, Redditch or somewhere else in the county. So I can have a look at the data for across the districts. It doesn't go down to town level, and that is an issue we have with tourism data. We've got our businesses that we speak to. We've got a business barometer out live at the moment. So if you do have any tourism businesses in your area, I'd really get them to try and fill that out, because we can then look at it by a business basis and see how different businesses are doing. I think, you know, there's some towns, villages that are doing really well, and some that probably need a little bit of extra love. And I'm thinking off the top of my head, somewhere like Evesham, where I'm speaking at in a couple of weeks' time, who are really trying to do a push on their tourism. But it's a really valid point. I can take it away and get some of that data from the districts and put that back to you. I think there's also a conversation where if you've got places you think where businesses are telling you they're maybe struggling a little bit, then you can let us know, and then we can work with our tourism consultant to go into that area and look at whether we can do sort of a mini destination plan for that town, working with the district councils. I hope that answers your question.
I think I've got Councillor Price next and then Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two categories of questions, one relating to business engagement, and I'll start there first. First question is, how many local producers and hospitality businesses are taking part this October for Taste Worcestershire? But also, how are smaller independent businesses are being supported to take part, given many of them don't have big marketing budgets? And then, in terms of longer-term strategy, what is the plan to make Taste Worcestershire a nationally recognised annual event rather than just a local promotion? And how we will measure the repeat visit rate from the people who first come to the Taste Worcestershire event? But also, what's the link between Taste Worcestershire and the county's wider food and drink strategy? Is this a one-off campaign, or does it fit within the wider pipeline? Thank you.
There was quite a lot in that, so if I miss anything, let me know. From a Taste Worcestershire, from a numbers point of view, so this year for the first time we did a Taste Producer event in May, where smaller producers were able to trade for free and larger producers paid for their stand, and there was people equitable, people were fine with that. But we had 26 producers on the day come to that event, and we had 100 buyers come to look at those different producers. I will say we had over half of them were alcohol, so we're quite a boozy county. Less food and drink there, so we worked hard to get a good balance. But that event was really well regarded by the sector and the buyers that came. I think it amazes me how many businesses don't buy locally, so it was an opportunity to really push that message, and we'll be repeating that event next May as well, and we're hoping that grows year on year. Also at the Three Counties show, where we're launching this Friday, we've done a reduced rate, so we're paying half of the going rate to have a stand at the Three Counties for any local producers, and we're working with Piston Gin to have sort of, it's the tipple zone, so again alcohol, and drinking responsibly. But we've got 7 producers in that area that have taken us up on that offer. Unfortunately, it's harvest time, so a lot of our producers are quite busy this time of year, so that's something I'd like to note for that. With regards to how many hospitality businesses are taking part, we've got 72 offers live and 10 events live already for this October, and they're still coming in at the moment. Hospitality are quite famously last minute with some of the work that they do. So we're still putting offers on every day. As I said, we've got over 1,000 vouchers downloaded. Last year we had 3,000, so we're looking to try and beat that number. And this year we've used some software. So it's been quite hard to get out of businesses how many people came and used the vouchers in their restaurant. So this year the consumer just has to press a button and GPS tracks that, so we can capture all the GPS tracks of vouchers that are downloaded. So we know how many times they're using them, whether they're just using them once, whether they're using them 6 times. And we can track all of that data. We're asking businesses as well if they can give us sort of a rough idea of how much that person spent when they were in the restaurant, so we can have a look of the return on investment, versus they came and claimed a £5 eggy crumpet, but they've also spent £3 on coffee, and they came with 4 other people who did the same, so we can look at that kind of multiplier effect. With regards to how we roll it out wider than just the county, I think this comes down to budgets a little bit. We've been trying to grow it year on year. I think it's starting to get a reputation now, and hopefully that grows over time. But if you had any ideas on how we can take it wider, I'd be really open to having those conversations.
Great, thank you. It's encouraging to see what measures are being taken to support smaller businesses, so that's really encouraging. And we can pick up offline on the wider pieces if you want.
Councillor James.
Fair, thank you. I just want to pick up on something Councillor Edmonds sort of hinted at with the TV advert stuff. Is that catering for a very specific demographic of people? Because I'm just thinking, I use streaming and I don't recall any Visit Worcestershire stuff. On social media, I just look, the TikTok is a bit, it's lovely, but it perhaps wouldn't engage people of my age who perhaps would go out and support more of the independent, because that's very much the direction of travel now for sort of under 30s are wanting to support local. Is there sort of scope for it to be tweaked slightly away from that ITVX and more onto the other digital platforms?
Thank you, that's a really valid point, and I think we're really good at engaging a 35 plus market. We do struggle with the under 35 market a little bit. I say the TikTok, we've not gone viral on TikTok, we've not made our mark fully on that yet, but we are having a lot of success with Instagram. The ITVX has worked really well for us for the money that we've spent on it, but we also put money behind digital platforms like YouTube when it's relevant. I think previously we've really focused on the family market with our summer campaign and a couples market with our Christmas campaign. Going forward with our heritage campaign, we're aiming that at under 40s market and an international market. So it's trying to pique people's interest in getting them to get involved with heritage earlier on. I take your point, and if there's places where you're spending a lot of time online and you think we should be advertising there, please let me know. I say my comms officer is much younger than me, he is of the right demographic, but we can always have a chat and see different places where we're putting things out.
Good. Lorna, can I just make a comment and ask a question? Obviously, my area is the Wyre Forest, and I would be so bold as to argue we've probably got two of the most prominent tourist destinations in the county in terms of the West Midlands Safari Park and also the Severn Valley Railway. And one thing that we've tried to do as a district council is because of course people who come to the West Midlands Safari Park, they drive in for the day, go to the safari park, they drive home. 2 miles down the road, we've got a fabulous Georgian town of Bewdley, and it's interesting the question that Councillor Allen sort of talked about in terms of getting a comparison across towns and districts, but you're not really comparing apples with apples. Who'd want to go to Kidderminster Town Centre as a tourist destination? I'm sure the Carpet Museum is very attractive, but it's no comparison to Bewdley and all that it's got to offer with the museum, the river, and all the rest of it. It's a tourist attraction itself. So what do we do in terms of working with our major tourist attractions like the Severn Valley Railway and the West Midlands Safari Park and others to make it not just a one day, but to sort of bring, to work together collaboratively so that people come for the weekend, and so they then spend in the restaurants, the pubs, the shops, the car parks, the museums, and all the rest of it? What do we do in terms of that?
It's a great question. So there's sort of two answers to this. The Safari Park and the Severn Valley Rail are both on the Alvet board, so they are very much across the fact that we are pushing for overnight stays. We're trying to push that love out across the whole county, and both of them have sections on the website where they talk about areas outside of their own business. It's quite hard to find on the Safari Park's website, and when they rebranded, they weren't going to go for Worcestershire Safari Park, which I did suggest, sadly, but it was worth a try. So they are very much working with us on pushing that message. They're very good with the accessibility message as well, and also regenerative tourism. So they're doing their bit as businesses. I agree, you know, it's a shame the number of people come into the safari park and then leave. I think what we've been doing is trying to position villages, particularly Bewdley, with the bridge reopening and that sort of celebrating that. We've been putting more money behind the reels and the marketing we've been doing for Bewdley Town Centre. All of our businesses who come to our networking events, we drive the message that we're pushing for overnight stays. And for every £15 extra that somebody spends with them, that has a knock-on effect to that £1 billion mark. So we've been very open with, you know, sort of giving them that homework, if you will, that they'll promote the county more widely. And we're seeing, as part of our awards criteria, you have to get maximum points in certain areas, you have to mention Worcestershire, you have to say what else is in the area, you have to suggest places to stay. And we're seeing more and more businesses doing that cross-promotion now and collaborating with each other. So if somebody hasn't got enough accommodation, they're recommending somewhere else that another party can stay. So we are seeing that really collaborative working approach. I think some of the bigger players maybe don't do it as much, but certainly in that small and medium-sized enterprise, they really are working together now for that kind of Worcestershire approach to tourism.
Good, pleased to hear it. Anybody else got any questions on tourism? No, in which case I think we have a recommendation. I think our only recommendation or comment as a committee is the specific point that Councillor Bowles raised about the train station, which Gary is going to take offline and discuss with you, Alan. Okay. So, if that's okay with everybody, we'll thank Lorna very much indeed for your report and presentation, and feel free to go and carry on the good work. In which case, we'll move on to our second substantive report, which we asked for in terms of government policies to support the Worcestershire economy. And obviously, we've got Gary here, so I'll hand straight over to you, Gary.
Thank you. And with your permission, Chair, we'll sort of, if we go through, because they're quite a dispersed group of policies, it's probably worth going through each one of them individually and taking questions as we go through, rather than me rabbit on about the 5 areas and then the questions sort of become a bit unrelated. So obviously, since the government came in, there's been a number of policy announcements. What we've started to do is to track those, because actually what's their impact on the county and its economic policy and plan, and obviously growth is key to that. One of those is the modern industrial strategy. The paper outlines the objectives of that and this sector-based approach. And there's something called the IS8, which are the key sectors of growth identified nationally. I'm not going to go through them because they're listed in the paper under 12, but also those as headline sectors become quite complex to understand. So actually, the areas are then focused on under 12, which outlines, I suppose, specific areas. The point that I would probably make is Worcestershire is got a wide demographic, as reference in the performance paper, in terms of the makeup and the scale of our sectors in Worcestershire, and they're quite diverse. In some areas we've got lots of businesses in these areas, in some we've got very few. But I think it is the role of the Growth Hub to identify equally and work with these groupings of businesses, because what you tend to find is, and the report on 14 goes into this, where each business has got a standard industrial classification. So it may be manufacturing of some metalwork, and you think, oh, right, okay. But it probably then supplies product into automotive, aerospace, defence, and a whole range of things that you only find out when you get below the surface. So one of the things that we're working with the Growth Hub team is to identify our businesses in each of these 8 areas, and equally how do they then work with and impact. Like I said, in 17, at this point, there's no identified sort of pot of money or something for us to identify and push towards, but nevertheless, often with these policies, this is where supply chain becomes important, and these sectors are sort of the key ones that then are identified for growth locally.
Thank you, Gary. Any questions on the industrial strategy? Or comments? Councillor Bowles.
Yes, thank you, yeah. Nice to see the sector, thanks for the report, by the way. Just on the sector-based plans, we go in the 8 priority sectors. Bearing in mind what's been said earlier, where does hospitality fit into this? Because obviously we've got a decline in hospitality in the employees and the sector. Does it fit into it, or how do we fit into it? Is my main one question, and then comment on something else later.
So tourism typically isn't one of these sectors because they see it as a UK sector. You know, if the tourist comes to Worcestershire, Warwickshire, that it is just moving the money around. What they're trying to do with these sectors is say these are the ones that have got potential for even further growth. So I suppose how they view hospitality and leisure is the UK has a certain pound spend, and that where that gets spent and which geography is the sort of report you've just had in terms of tourism. These are the areas that are saying actually we can grow the size of the cake, I suppose is the best way of describing it, so that the spend in these areas and the markets in these areas are both growing rapidly, and it's wider than just a UK cake, to put it in those terms.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Any other? Councillor Bowles, you said you got another comment?
Yeah,
or?
yeah, sorry. Yeah. Just on the purpose of the meeting, the panel is asked to, just on the final point, agree any comments or recommendations for the Cabinet with responsibility for business and skills. Shame's not here to hear it, but I think within that we need to tackle how we as a county council will roll it out, because it's nice to see it all there, but I'm not seeing a rollout from this and how we're going to achieve the recommendations. So just a thought on that, Chair.
Okay, so in terms of how we're going to implement the strategy. Okay, yeah, okay. Good, okay, that deals with industrial strategy. If nobody has any other questions, do you want to move on to business growth service?
Yeah, so the business growth service was launched on the 31st of July, and it's a real focus in terms of business support, and I suppose obviously a key area of how we support businesses start up, grow, scale, and the advice and guidance that they need, not just focused on kind of grants. The government's launched this service, which is a national service, and it's there to be an online service where you'll be able to access through various methods in terms of telephone, web chat, webinars. Locally, the growth hub becomes then really important because actually it's the area that can, I suppose, diagnose that element in terms of what advice and guidance they're looking for and where can they get it from. Is that through an online source like the Business Growth Service, or does it become a local advice and guidance that they want? So this is an area that's, although launched, is still pretty much established. Previously, companies who were looking for export advice are already down something called the Export Academy. So this is kind of proven in terms of an online service. However, in terms of our impact, what I would say is we're making sure that that national service has as much impact locally as possible, and we sort of, I suppose, translate the national into local. And then equally, you know, that growth hub team is there to get that advice, intelligence on what we're trying to do. So this is definitely a change, and I think something for business owners and managers to think about in terms of how they access their support is definitely the change. And then obviously, at the moment, a lot of our local support is funded through UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which is through the district councils, and at the moment that's due to end with no successor. So there is a risk here as well.
Thanks. Any questions? Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. Very interesting. I just have a few questions in regards to the Business Growth Service. We've seen a lot of material here around the national strategy, but I'd like to understand how it's actually landing for Worcestershire businesses. So the first question is, how is the Business Growth Service different from the old Growth Hub model? And what does that mean for Worcestershire businesses in actual practice? And then additionally, how many Worcestershire SMEs have already engaged with the service since its launch? Thank you.
Okay. In terms of how does it differ from what we currently offer, I suppose the way that the Growth Hub work is that they take those business inquiries in. So I'm looking for, I don't know, advice on tax or advice on marketing or whichever their issue is. And the Growth Hub will identify where that support is. And it could be locally, it could be through a regional service, it could be online. And they will point and direct and signpost the way through. So the account managers that work within the Growth Hub are not business advisors. They are literally account managers and business engagers where they will work with a business over their time to make sure they're getting the right advice and support. How this plugs in is it will provide a sort of a national standardised approach and probably a lot of online resource which the business and owner can use. I think that then, I suppose, if you're then kind of thinking about where the risk is, the obvious one is most businesses are quite happy to use that online service, but some actually want somebody face-to-face to help and support them. And I think it's how do we navigate that through in the coming time, as we go forwards, as the Business Growth Service rolls out over the coming 12 to 18 months. In terms of how many have accessed this already, at the moment the Business Growth Service is different products, so it's quite difficult to say how many have gone through that route. I suspect, given it was launched just before the summer, I suspect most businesses won't even know that it's out there at this point, which is where it's probably really important for us on the ground to be able to translate that into and pointing businesses to those resources.
Thank you. Just a follow-up. How we translate those business into that. How would we do that quickly and effectively?
So when the account manager sits down with the business, they'll talk to them about their challenges, some of their growth plans, their prospects, what they're trying to do, and where appropriate, they will then refer in and signpost in. So it's a kind of referral and signposting service that the Growth Hub operates, like I said, rather than advice. So if that is most appropriate within the Business Growth Service, that's where they'll point them.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Councillor Edmund.
Hi, thanks for that. Basically, yeah, I've had experience of growth hubs, etc. in Birmingham, in the West Midlands there. Certainly now, looking at this, what you've described is very similar to what I've experienced myself. Obviously, you're talking about 12 to 18-month programme for things to evolve. In terms of risk assessment, though, as you've highlighted, really, the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, as you've highlighted, is to cease. So, so we know this is going to happen, and obviously government will be feeding out at some point what some muted options may be. But do we have a backup plan? Do we have something to say, right, if this doesn't happen, we'll move this direction? Because turning that ship around sometimes for businesses is very difficult, and certainty in business is everything. So that's really it. It's an open thing. I don't expect a cast iron answer to this. Okay.
I think there's a brutal honest answer that says with no successor yet identified, actually the service locally starts to disappear. The reality is that, yes, we do have some plan Bs that are related to the financial position in terms of the way that we're going through, but obviously that's subject to decision through the County Council's budgetary process and our partners, because this UK SBF went to the district councils, so obviously we're working with as many partners as we can at this point. What I would say then is, yes, there are other ideas that we've had. Often it is about information, advice and guidance, and you can get that from various sources. The local private sector are often willing to give people a degree of free support. I think our challenge there is, but what quality? So one of the things we were always able to do when we designed some of the programs that we offer now, they are not all grant-based, so there's not all a grant at the end of them. Where they are information, advice and guidance, we could qualify that and get customer feedback. So I think at the moment we are in that kind of planning phase. The other challenge to all this comes is that often government decisions come quite late. So previously, not this last financial year, but the financial year before, the confirmation of Growth Hub funding from central government came on basically the 30th of March. These things become quite a challenge to manage for the executive team, but nevertheless one that we're not unused to. And I think at this point in probably the financial cycle, we're obviously working through and having conversations with as many of our MPs and government officials that are recognising that if there is no successor, then there will be a local impact.
And so the brutally honest answer.
Good. Any more questions on the growth service? No, in which case we'll move on to the Get Britain Working white paper, Gary.
Yeah, and this paper is coming to Cabinet on the 25th of September, so I don't want to steal any of the thunder, although it's quite a lengthy paper. But this is why taking this bit in sections. Getting Britain white paper came out back in November. Now we've got to write a local plan, which is what is going to Cabinet for approval. That has input from the Department of Work and Pensions and the NHS in terms of how we're moving people into work and work opportunities. What I would say probably, and again it's back to the performance data pack, is that actually in terms of our economic activity rate, we are just below the 80% target already. So Worcestershire is a place where people find work and people find employment. Sometimes that can be part-time, sometimes low wage, so that becomes some of our challenges. But where we're looking to focus really, and I suppose it is for the data pack for you to start looking at, in terms of the youth unemployment and the youth guarantee in every area is really important, because we're actually seeing rising levels of unemployment, particularly in Worcester and Redditch, but actually we're seeing that across the whole county now. And also health can become that barrier where people not stepping out of the workplace, and actually how do we keep them engaged. So that plan is there to look at sort of short-term priorities and long-term priorities, and how some of the changes of how we work together as a sort of support system to get that individual back into the workplace, or equally not to exit the workplace in the first place. So what I would say about this in terms of Connect to Work will be launched in the autumn. That's a sum of money that will work with over 2,000 people over the next 5 years to re-engage them with the workplace. And you know, we have opportunities like Youth Hubs that works in the Hive in Worcester and in Howe College in Redditch. So lots of activity here, but again, probably a reference to that Cabinet paper next on Thursday.
Thank you. Any questions? Seb?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I'm sceptical over the paper actually working, but I suppose the challenge is, you know, what happened? You know, we've got a government that has increased NI, people are, you know, unemployment is higher. What happens if the trend continues? You know, I've done a quick Google that the funding available to areas isn't huge. It's not going to solve the problem. So what do we do if unemployment is getting higher and this doesn't work? Have we got that plan B, or does it have to be kicked back to a central point saying, you know, you have to look after businesses and not just look after your back pocket?
I think with all this, there's no question that there's a sort of triangle between the individual and the employer and then the support service that is, you know, how does this work? If all those bits are not working in harmony, then unfortunately, yeah, we'll end up with more individuals. I don't think we've got enough money within the system and enough resource to actually solve the problem locally through that. However, the fact that there is support there means that we can continue to work and do the best we can with what we've got.
Yeah, just one thing coming back on that point with regard to data. So your colleagues sitting behind will now start to agree, I think. One of the things that we have got access to is data, and it's already been highlighted that really we need to drill down on some of this data. And certainly what you're talking about there is connectivity, connection of services. But if we're not aiming at the right target, then we'll miss the target. So again, it's one of those things, is internally, what can we do to improve our view of the data?
So I think we're very conscious of the data and drilling down into that. The Getting Worcestershire Working Plan, there's a very fancy chart that you will see that actually identifies and breaks down the whole kind of workforce and then kind of says, well, actually, where they are. So we have got quite an excessive number of students, which you wouldn't be surprised because actually we've got a university. They are classified as then inactive. And the same with the kind of retirement piece. Where we have got programmes that work, so if you look at our Youth Hub programme in Worcester, that has put in, that has dealt with about just 366 participants. Of that, we've had 183 go into employment, and the year 4, that programme's just starting to start through. So I think where we are working and where we have got programmes, we are seeing that we are making an impact. Certainly our feedback and our follow-up with our sort of DWP colleagues is the unemployment, particularly the youth unemployment bit, would be worse if we didn't have that service. So there's that kind of dynamic going on. I think the data is important and we're continually kind of refining that in terms of performance and then the economy. Of course, you're trying to track people, which can become quite hard. But what I would say is that obviously, you know, you could say, well, actually, that means you've only got roughly 50% of those people into work. Of course, people will go into training. And this is where then the health system is really important, because actually some people need that health intervention or housing intervention, working with our district colleagues, to actually enable them then gradually to get closer to the workplace. So, as always, this is a complex piece that we're always tracking, trying to track the data, which is the performance data that you see, but also the programme data as well tells us quite a lot about the county and the economy.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a question, Gary, on that paragraph? Because I read it several times, and I guess, forgive me, I'm ever so slightly confused as to who we're exactly meant to be targeting. Because if you're a full-time student, you're a full-time student. You know, when I get to retirement, if I ever get there, I don't think I want to start working, again. So, and obviously it differentiates those from unemployed individuals who are actively searching for work. So who exactly, what cohort of economically inactive people are we targeting? Because it strikes me it should be those who've sort of low-level sickness. We hear huge amounts about mental health. There's a million people out of the workforce nationally, people on benefits who could potentially be eligible to do some form of work. Surely it should be those that we should tackling, because I don't see how we're going to convince people who are retired to say, you've worked for 40 years, come and get a job, or you're a full-time student. So help me with that, Gary.
So the Getting Worcestershire Working is focused on, those pockets and those, I suppose, cohorts within the working age population that we can move into work. People who often at that young age group that I've identified, 16 to 24s, often how do they get into work, some of their barriers, and it's working with them. And therefore we are quite keen to, I suppose, target this. We will also find other pockets and other areas, so veterans, which again figure in the figures, quite a small cohort. People who come out of prison equally become an important cohort, because again, engaging back into the workforce is one of those factors that means it sets them on a path that they're not going to reoffend. So by breaking down the data, what that's enabled us to do is to identify those people and work with the right agencies locally to ensure that we're wrapping the right help around the right people to ensure that they can engage with the workforce. Obviously, a large number, as you identified, have got health issues, and I think therefore how are we working with the health sector to kind of improve their situation so they can engage with work, or equally, employers are willing to adapt and take these people into their workplace, because often they can be some of the most valued and loyal once they've been given a chance. So it's all those bits of the system working around the individual, and then also employers who have got opportunities, which perhaps despite the economic conditions, we know that there are plenty out there who've got opportunities for us to fill.
Good. If there's no more questions, shall we move on to Skills England, a future fit skills system?
Yeah, and since writing the paper, this has changed again. The government have launched Skills England, which is really about identifying. So when we track the Hereford and Worcester Chamber Commerce quarterly economic survey, what we find is that there are about 50% employers say that they're finding it difficult to recruit. And often they're saying that's because of skill level or qualifications. So what this is about is Skills England nationally are now charged with identifying those employers and identifying their skills needs, and how does the local training system kind of merge in to get that working correctly. The change that happened with the national government reshuffle was that this function also went over to the Department of Work and Pensions. So perhaps where you were thinking that kind of getting Worcestershire working and all that, normal what you would think would be in a sort of the Work and Pensions Department, also Skills England went over there as well. And therefore we're trying to stick close to the government changes on apprenticeships, government train, which also went over to DWP. And therefore we are working, I think, to understand this policy and how that we can make the most efficient use of that national programs to, again, help support actually the employers to grow and find the right talent. So I'd probably be quite short on this one because it has changed very recently.
Thanks, Gary. Any questions? No? Okay.
Good.
Carry on to the
Keep
last
going.
one then. Yeah.
Final
Careers.
one. So the Careers and Enterprise Company, this is where work experience, the relationship between our schools locally, our young people, and showing them the career opportunities that are available locally. We've run a careers hub in Worcestershire for quite some time now, and every school is part of that careers hub in terms of accessing the kind of information that we provide. We work with the Training Providers Association that help us in terms of promoting the training offer in a coordinated way, and particularly apprenticeships. We note now that there are changes to work experience and meaningful employer encounters. Given Worcestershire's, a county that's not unlike any other shire, is very similar to most shires, it's got lots of small micro businesses, then actually engaging those businesses in that work experience piece is going to be really important to hit. Giving everybody a work experience encounter is going to be one of our challenges, but one that we're working through. What we're finding is, again, that the volume of funding is becoming to achieve the task is becoming, so as the ambition lifts, but actually the money's not necessarily following to do the task. So we're having to be quite creative, I think, in this area, that it seems like greater focus seems to be going on. So setting off our young people with a career and an ambition that they can stay in Worcestershire is something that we're very keen to achieve.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Any questions on Seb?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to pick up something. I know we've spoken a little bit about universities, but are we engaging that? Because I'm just looking here, less than 50% of university students will have any form of work experience when they leave university. So we're almost getting them a bit of paper and then they're entering a world where they don't know how an actual workplace works. I know Worcester has a great outcomes, but they don't necessarily all live in Worcestershire. So we're, gearing them up to go off into other counties that may not benefit us. So I'm just interested in what we're doing with universities.
So in particular with obviously Worcester, because once they're here or if they live locally, then we're more likely to keep them locally. We've got a good conversation going with the Worcestershire and the business school, but actually across all the university directorates in terms of how we can get more experience into that. We've also seen a national pilot where we were working with the trainee teachers in the Worcester University to give them experience of work, because often teachers in particular go to school, they do their A-levels, they then go to university and then they go back to school. So one of the things that's been picked up nationally by the Department of Education as a fantastic pilot, and we're seeing that rolled nationally. So I think the more that, again, we can give opportunities and identify opportunities to those local graduates really helps us. My other data on, because obviously one of the things we do want to encourage, and Worcester University doesn't provide every course, is it's a little bit out of date, my data, but we used to track where do our A-level students go, and actually it was well over 65% went to kind of universities within an hour, which always gave me some hope, because I kind of thought, actually, yes, they've gone away to study and probably, you know, they've kind of that life experience, but actually there's an opportunity to kind of hook them back at the end of their course. So I think we did start to work through, you know, if you're doing chemical engineering, then these are the businesses that we're really interested in talking to you. And we were starting to develop that. Unfortunately, COVID came in and it kind of melted away. But something I'd be keen that I think we have another look at, because, yeah, often that young person who's got a passion for a particular subject that's not provided locally, given that breadth of our business base, often we've got somebody who can or somebody who has. And, you know, so sometimes you think, oh, the space industry, there can't be many Worcestershire businesses in that. Actually, we've got more than you would think.
Good. Thank you. Any questions or comments? No. Okay. Well, thank you, Gary. And I think we can note that report. I don't think there's any formal recommendations that we need to make. Good. Okay. In which case we'll move on to performance and budget. And Dave, Louisa, and Sarah, if you want to come forward. You're staying, aren't you, Gary? Yeah. Is there any water in that water cooler at the back? I'm just okay, thank you. Welcome. When you made yourself comfortable, I'll hand over to you, Sarah and Dave.
I'll go into bat first. Yes. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone. The performance information, I'll try and actually tailor this a little bit in the light of some of the discussion that we've just had in Gary's papers about some of the information that's in the pack. The information that starts on page 23 for the performance is an updated version. Most of the information, where we can, has been updated at the end of Q1 of this financial year. There's also parallel to this, and some of you may have referred to it, a Power BI report, which is on the Our Performance page of the County Council website. And that gives you the ability to do a bit of drill down and see things in a much better way than really I can do with some of the graphs in the report here. And that page as well, Chair, there's a little expansion on that. We've got some other panel reports in there as well for corporates and communities and environment. And also there's audit and governance reports on there now. The risk reports that have gone to audit and governance for many years are now going to be complemented by a performance one. I think the next meeting of audit and governance will be the first one where they have a performance report, and we'll make sure that that's all updated so you can refer to that at any point, as can members of the public. In terms of the information that's in this report, which starts on page 23 of the printed pack, there are several of the annual data sets which would relate really to areas that Gary has alluded to, which we will get updates for in the next month or so. In terms of the all-important business demography data set, which is produced by Office for National Statistics, that gives us all the information around size of businesses, and also, again, referring to what Gary's talked about, the standard industrial classification update telling us how many businesses we've got in each specific sector and industry. That will be updated. If last year is any guide, it will be November. It may just be, touch wood, just before the panel next meets, which I think is about the 19th of November, something like that. So we'd hopefully have an update there. It's an annually updated data set. But other information as well that will be updated at the same point would be around the business survival rate, and there's quite a bit in this pack about that, but it's information that you had to hand at the last meeting, which is a shame. It's not updated more frequently, but it's using information from annual surveys conducted with businesses. But Chair, to allude to things where we have got an update since the last meeting, there are a couple of things. Steve Ashton, I think, was at the last meeting, which was to do with the gigabit connectivity. And in terms of that, there's it's only going to be an incremental rise now. There is a little graph that's on page 26 of the pack, and that really just shows a continued coming together really of the Worcestershire percentage of businesses or premises and residences that are able to connect to superfast broadband. And those percentages, as with the UK one, will only rise incrementally now. We had the big surge where the programme was initially rolled out, as you can see from the graph. And now our figure, as with the UK one, is going up bit by bit. In terms of the percentage point gap, that's probably a useful indicator of how we're doing in terms of the UK rollout. There was ever such a slight increase in terms of our figure for gigabit connectivity. It rose to 85.53 at the end of June. It had been 84.83 at the end of the previous quarter. The UK figure rose to 87.93, and that had been 87.06 at the end of March. So you can see not huge increases, but the percentage point gap between Worcestershire's percentage of properties that are connected and the UK's, it's grown ever so slightly. So we were 2.23 percentage points below the UK figure at the end of March. It's 2.4 percentage points at the end of June. Not huge, but just ever such a slight slowing down. Just as well, it was raised previously, I think, in the old panel, that indicator, it's one of those old indicators around, you can take a horse to water. It will show how many businesses and residence properties are able to connect. Whether people choose to do so is a different kettle of fish. The graph that's above that one on page 26, there's an update every quarter for that, the working age adults in employment. And the data set continues to refer, Chair, to the 16 to 64 age group, although it was raised at the last meeting rightly that what about figures for other age groups beyond 64? But again, it's about the percentage point difference. The performance indicator that there's been for that in the past has always looked at Worcestershire's percentage of its 16 to 64 age group that's in employment, and how does that compare to the England percentage? And Worcestershire's is invariably above that. Again, the slight deterioration, the percentage point difference, the figure there where Worcestershire's latest figure was 78% and the England figure of 75.7, it meant that the percentage point difference had dipped from, it was the end of the previous quarter in March, it was 3.97 percentage points difference. Worcestershire's was higher, so it's narrowed back to 2.3. It's not of undue concern. There's nothing out of the ordinary. The June figures, looking back over previous years, the percentage point difference has always dropped slightly in the June data set. There'll be seasonal factors at work. Gary may be aware of more recent local issues as well. But I would say at the moment it's not a concern in the sense that we're not seeing anything out of the ordinary in the pattern of figures there that we see. In terms of the other area, Chair, that I wanted to, because it is sort of touching on what was referred to in Gary's presentation, there are a couple of areas. The one, of course, about the links into employment from schools, from education. There's in the Skills and Investment team, under Judy Gibbs, they look at the Gatsby benchmarks, and that's the very last graph in the little pack. And that's all around the engagement and what opportunities there are for students to receive various advice, stable careers programme and so on, and addressing the needs of students to do educational establishments, do that, and engagement with businesses, with cornerstone businesses, the key businesses that we want to have on board with us in terms of, as Gary said, trying to find solutions to for students moving into the workplace. But the other area as well, where there's a change every quarter, is on the claimant count. And again, Gary referred to this, and there are some detailed tables. It goes down a little bit in your pack, and it starts on, if I go down far enough, I think it's actually on page 34. Yes, thank you, Gary. So there's claimant counts, page 36 by district, and it goes through. Now, Gary referred to a fact that in a couple of the age groups, the lower age groups, there's been an increase in claimant counts. Doing a little bit on the county figures, so amalgamating all of those district by district figures to come up with county-wide figures. If you're looking back at the more recent sort of trend, the end of June compared with the end of March, it looks a startling increase, but the figures are relatively small. There was a 50% increase in claimants county-wide in the 16 to 17 age group. But the number of people in that is relatively small. It's gone from 20 at the end of March to 30 at the end of June. In terms of 18 to 24s, by comparison, if you're looking at the end of March to the end of June, there was a decrease in claimants. It went from 2,135 to 2015 county-wide, to a 5.6% drop. But if you're looking at over a slightly longer period of time, and going back from June last year to June this year, then there is an increase in that 18 to 24 claimant count. It was 1,870 claimants, 18 to 24 at the end of June last year, 2015 at the end of June this year, so 7.8% increase. And the Redditch figure, the number of claimants, it rose by 105 to 445. That's compared with June last year. Other age groups, I've done sort of very broad comparison because there are sort of breakdowns for 5-year age groups. But there's one for 35 to, if you're looking at 35 to 64. Again, a decrease compared at the end of June, compared with the end of March. 6,745 claimants aged 35 to 64 at the end of March, 6,315 at the end of June. So it's a 6.3% decline. And again, it's reflected as well in the longer term. The June 2024 figure was 6,640, and we've seen that drop by nearly just a fraction under 5% to 6,315. But as Gary referred to, there is that increase over the last year in that, particularly that 18 to 24 age range. The other data, as I said, there'll be increase updates on the business demography, business survival rates, and also the other one that should be updated in November will be around Office of Rail and Road for the usage of rail stations. So what I'll try to do, we'll bring that together and also include some of the information about the borderline stations, as the previous panel asked for. And I think it is useful just to see how we're sitting in relation to trends nationally, but also regionally. And also, of course, we're aware that there'll be people travelling into Worcestershire, through Worcestershire from neighbouring locales as well. I hope that's not too skimpy a run through, but I hope that's helpful, and I'll try and pick up any questions on the stats side.
Thanks, Dave. Very interesting. Any questions? Councillor Bales. Sorry, wrong one.
Is that my time up, Bell? Or? Thank you for that, and most interesting as ever. And it's quite interesting to see some of the comparisons and how we're doing, which is brilliant. Just on page 25, on the business survival rates, and I know Councillor Price will have the same concerns as I will. We seem to be okay for trading for 1 year, but there seems to be cause for concern for trading for 3 years later. The percentage is way under 20%. So basically the question is, what is going on there, and how can we as a district, as county councillors within that district, help? Just a point on that, it might be worth commenting within our draft local plan which is being put. There's nothing in our draft local plan which is even trying to address this and coming to terms with this. So one is a point which I think you ought to comment on within our local plan, and the other is, you know, what's going on and can we help with that?
I can pick up on the statistical side in that, and there is, it's been retained, my very verbose note that's on one of the pages at the bottom, which is around how the business survival rate figures, particularly for Bromsgrove over a 3-year period, 2018 to 2020, and some of the Wyre Forest ones, was skewed by the way that businesses were being registered at one time, single traders registering briefly and then going almost into existence for a while, registering and then deregistering, and so they would count as a business death. I hate that phrase, but that's what it would count as. So that would skew the figure. It would just still have an effect because, as you rightly say, there is that discrepancy, or not discrepancy, but that alarming change over the 3-year survival rate. Part of that, at least, will be explained by the way ONS has collected the data and the business registration. Right.
And the second half of the question, I will work with my planning colleagues to feed into the local plan consultation, particularly the economic side in relation to Bromsgrove's local plan.
A follow-on from that, I mean, the question was, does it give us any cause for concern that I know we've got underlying problems with the data sets, but if you were to take that into account with the statistics, and I know, you know, my favourite expression is statistics and damn right lies, but with that statistics, is there anything under there which we need to be aware of if you take those biases coming into it? Because it does seem, you know, a very large error within there.
I think that the statistical anomaly probably plays into that number, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. Okay. I think some of the classic barriers in terms of why does a business not survive 3 years, dare I say, it's turnover and cash flow, and therefore advice often becomes the key issue. Often we find out too late that we can't support these businesses or they're already in crisis. But it is really hard to go from 1 year to 3 years to 5 years, and that doesn't matter whether you're in Worcestershire or whether you're in which district you're in. That is a national phenomenon that we need to get a better around advice. Often people start up their business because they like what they do in terms of a hobby or an idea. Converting that into a business is hard graft.
And Chair, if I may, just on the statistics side as well, Gary's absolutely right. And what we have tried to explore before was, given the available data come out, is there a way that we could tease out and smooth out, if you like, that skewing. It is tricky to do, and it would probably play havoc with the data set, and it would be, you'd probably then be given information that you might quote, and it would be different to these nationally produced data sets. I absolutely take the point, Councillor, that ideally what we want is to be able to move into a period where the anomaly doesn't have that impact, and then we don't have to not explain it away, but to put in a verbose note like this in the report, and then it goes away from the non-statistical side into what Gary has alluded to.
Got Councillor Price and Councillor James. Councillor Allen.
I'm slightly inclined to disagree with you. I think we need to see the split out as part of a scrutiny committee, just so we can understand the data sets in their fullest form. And additionally, I'd like to understand what types of businesses that seem to be failing after the further periods between 3 and 5 years, because if it's a particular business set that's failing, surely we should really get into the depths of that and address it.
Having looked at it, you can't nail it to one sector or one type. It tends to be the functions of business that fail in finance, marketing, people. We can go back to the kind of raw data set for the kind of statistical anomaly, but it just tells you that loads of businesses were registered in Bromsgrove, and then loads of businesses were deregistered in the transport and logistics sector. It was a phenomenon of a self-employment registration. So although happy to share the figures, I'm just not sure we're going to learn a lot, I think might be the challenge, but happy to share them.
Thank you.
Councillor James.
Fab, thank you. And I think this might give an indication over some questioning I'm going to go on to later, but I want to look at the rail usage stats, and I know there's, they're great for what they are, but they don't give an indication on the services coming out of them. So if we look, for example, at someone like Redditch would have 3 journeys an hour, now have 2, but we're not contrasting that against the footfall. We're basically, you look at that and you say, oh, it's perhaps the footfall's going down, therefore if we want to say scrap investment into a train station, there's a business case. But actually, I think it'd be really, really important if we have a correlation between the services offered or the amount of journeys that are going on per hour and the average footfall. Because I would perhaps notionally argue that footfall may actually be higher, but the offering is lower.
That's a very, very good point. And in fact, there is an indicator that was included in the performance pack at one time for the old environment and economy panel, and we've still got the information, and it's still, the data set is still produced. It looks at the amount of services that are deemed to be travelling on time. But from that, you can just get the number of services from every station through. It's on the National Rail website, and get the information. I still access that each month. We can look at that and aggregate, look at separate services, look at the I know that's aside from your query, Councillor, about the punctuality, but yes, we could give that correlation and say that in a particular quarter there were a certain number of different services that ran, particularly in the peak times. The focus has always been on 6 a.m. to 10 in the morning, and then 4 till 8 at night, that period. So yes, there's the data around, and we can include that in this particular report.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm glad you picked up on page 26 that you were still showing 16 to 64. Do we know when it will be changed from 16 to 67? Or 68 or 70, or whatever's coming down the line?
That might be the reason there isn't any indication at the moment, because it might change again. That there isn't. I have looked, and there is. You can get the data to interrogate at the higher age range, and virtually there's no data at the moment that's really built up. But it's something that I'll try and see if we can source anything that will be, almost nationally accredited as a stat that we could include in this.
Okay, thank you. If I may carry on, please, Chair. I think last time we spoke about local broadband, and I see it's here. I asked for information about Croom near High Green in my division. Now, I have had some information, but I wondered, I know you can't do it this second, but could I request that the next couple of days somebody gives me an update where we are with getting people actually connected to an internet at a speed that actually means they can run a business from home and actually do some work?
I'll take that away and we'll have a conversation, and I'll get Steve Ashton as the officer to contact you.
Councillor Bale.
Thank you, Chair. Just through you, just regarding business enterprise by broad industry groups, looking at that, it seems that in every table that there's the highest sector is transport and storage. Is there any reason why that's happening, and is there anything we need to be worried about?
We're sort of located in the middle of the country, so we're quite a good position in to actually obviously move goods around, hence probably a reasonable sized transport and logistics sector. However, I think our planning colleagues in the districts are always the ones who are kind of working through, and do we want to see probably that large scale warehousing. The answers in the local plans are not necessarily for us.
Any other questions or comments? No? Okay. Should we go on to the budget then? Thank you very much indeed, Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the first report of 25-26 on the budget, the first quarter, so up to the end of June. Just to put that into some context, net recurrent pressures of 24-25 of £15.1 million were addressed within the budget, but it's still a very challenging position, not just for Worcestershire, but for other local authorities, as you're aware. Demand for services and placement availability are driving up costs both in adult and children's social care, and with the impact of national minimum wage and employer contribution to NI, that has caused a significant impact. So current position, that being said, current position, we're showing a break-even position. That is after the use of £11.6 million worth of reserve. That is 3.4 million less than we had in budget, but that's due to some corporate underspends around borrowing and MRP. And also, but we're also to be minded that we're using £33.6 million of exceptional financial support within that to get to that break-even position. Directorates are continuing to work on mitigation strategies in order to try and contain the budget and ensure that there is no overspend in the year. Page 4 will give you the detailed breakdown of each area and where they are within their budgets. You can see there that the overspends again are sitting within adults and children's, with small underspends elsewhere. You can also see that there is an underspend in homeschool transport. It's not the remit of this panel, but in itself is a good news story. Savings in the year, so obviously there was a huge savings target, 12.5 million. At the moment, there's good progress being made towards this. So we've got 82% of that being rated as green, so that's either delivered or we're assured that it will be delivered by the end of the financial year. And at the moment, there is only £300,000 worth within the red area, so that is really good progress in the year. You can see there E&I, which is the area that this scrutiny panel is concerned. We've got no red and £308,000, which is at risk. That's moved slightly as we've moved, because obviously this is quarter 3, this is June position, so we've only got about £180,000 now that's at risk within that area. So the forecast for reserves shows a decrease from 93.7 and to 70.7. So that's the use of reserve in year to support the budget and various individual spends. So a lot of the conversation around tourism open for business, this is funded from reserves currently. By the end of 25-26, we'll only have £13 million of reserve that is unearmarked. So it's deemed as usable, so it's not aligned to any grant conditions and that type of thing. And that's what we're calling the usable risk reserve. Obviously, if there's further underspends in the year, then that position will improve, and overspends conversely will make that position worse. There's a slide here, slide 7, which talks about, and this is just to give the whole picture for the council, around the high needs block, DSG, again, something that doesn't concern the scrutiny, but just to give you the whole picture. So the forecast deficit there on that element of the budget is 184 million by the end of the current financial year. There's a statutory instrument that allows us to extend that deficit until March 28. Now, at the start of this financial year, there was no, the statutory instrument was due to finish. It's now been extended to March 28. There is a schools paper in the autumn, so that will give us an idea as the government strategy is how that will be dealt with. Again, I'll just point out that Worcestershire County Council is not the only council in that position. Capital position, so we've currently got a big capital programme of 495 million. Of that, 25-26 programme is 180 million, with a £24 million spend until quarter 1. What we can see there is, obviously, if you chunked it up into quarters, it looks like we're quite slow with the spend. We forecast quite in depth with project managers to try and get that forecast correct. We've got a number of big schemes that are more likely to spend heavily towards the end of this financial year. What we need to do is make sure that that spend is forecast correctly, because that affects our MRP and our borrowing. So we'll be working further on that with the budget managers. Slide 9 gives you the funding for those schemes. So we've broken down the schemes into areas of business, if you like. And then you can see with exceptional financial support, you can see is the bottom line there of 33.6 million, and how we are going to fund that spend. So based on the council's current financial position, a number of decisions are being made around the capital programme, and council has been asked to consider reductions in borrowing around several schemes that are listed there, and I'm assuming we'll come back to that at a later point when I finish. So focusing on this panel's area, so the area of E&I, as I said when I presented last time, environment and economy have the same slide pack, just because of a lot of the things are intertwined. If you want to see it differently, then let us know and we can produce that. But at the minute, you're receiving the same figures so that you can see the interrelationships. So for quarter 3, there's a small underspend in this area, so that's 200,000 underspend. So again, good news, and as I say, there's a £1 million on home to school transport. So within E&I, there are some headlines, there are some ups and downs. So within waste management, we've got a small underspend. That's due to increased waste, but it means that we're in a cheaper tonnage bracket. Again, that contract is monitored month by month, and we're trying to see where the fluctuations are and smooth those out within the forecast. But obviously, it's a £50 million contract, so it's small percentages that we're talking about, differences. And we're waiting to see what's happened. Obviously, we have had a very hot summer, so it'd be interesting to see how that flows through in some of the waste, especially around the green waste. We've had 100k underspend in road lighting. Again, that's just the tail out of the LED rollout coming through. Small underspend in passenger transport, and then highways ops is overspending, but that's due in the main to some vehicle maintenance. The gritters are getting very expensive to maintain. We've had some high bills there, and there's also a bit of a struggle there to meet the vacancy management target. There's just a slide there explaining about the key headlines around home to school transport. As I say, it doesn't affect the scrutiny panel, but we can see there that we've had some successes in renegotiating contracts, but the number of children with EHCPs are still growing. And then capital position for E&I, so overall capital programme of 266 million. 25-26 is 101 million with a £20 million spend at quarter 1. So there we're looking more in line to finish at 101 million. And just some little stats there around the capital programme being funded, 36% by borrowing and 60% by grants. And again, just a repetition of the fact that the programme is being looked at to try and reduce the pressure on MRP and borrowing. So that was a very quick run through. I'm happy to take questions.
Good, thank you. Councillor Price, first of all.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. Again, some really interesting figures in there. I just want to focus more on the waste management side of things in terms of the underspend. We say it's linked to higher tonnage at a lower per tonne rate. Could we clarify exactly how the tonnage increase has translated into savings, given more waste normally means higher costs overall?
Yeah, so the way the contract is set up, because we're producing more weight, our cost per tonne actually goes down, but Worcestershire is very on sort of I can't remember the actual number, but we're very on, sometimes we dip above and sometimes we dip below, but we're pretty convinced we're going to be above that line and hence get the reduced tonnage. It doesn't feel right because obviously we're looking at waste reduction. So it's just the way that the contract is set up.
Yeah, thank you. I might have a whole series of questions, so I will potentially back and forth. And, you know, I want to start by saying it's disappointing that I'm saying them to you, but perhaps should be the cabinet member who isn't here today, because it's probably not something, it's more of a political choice maybe. But drilling down then on this cuts that we're looking at. So page 10 in the presentation. So I'd love to know the rationale between, because we've already identified from Dave that we don't necessarily have the figures to back up this railway station and how effective it could be or isn't. Is a bit of a vague. Where has the idea of removing the improvements to Redditch railway station come from? Is that a recommendation? And I suppose from a member's point of view, perhaps for the chairs, we obviously find out from the local press that this was on the table before it came to scrutiny. So I'm just trying to work out what mechanism happened there. And yeah, sort of 12 million on the grand scheme of things for a very popular station perhaps doesn't seem like the best cost-saving mechanism.
It's part of a range of options, and when obviously Cabinet's looking at budget is about as far as I can go. I think in answering your question, the rest of it's a political question, really.
Seb. Yeah, regrettably we don't have a cabinet member here, and hopefully there'll be a few at cabinet on, I think, is it Thursday, so I'm sure they'll be asked on Thursday. Next question, yeah.
I was going to say, though, that's so disappointing, but fully appreciate it, and thank you. I think that says more than any answer would do. I suppose it's just, again, looking forward on LGR now, and sort of, is there potential? Obviously, we don't want staff to leave, and I know that might fall into perhaps my corp and comms world as well, but I'm just making sure that we are, you know, making sure that any transitional period, that's not factored into any sort of economic savings or any potential that services, you know, if we go to 1 or 2, you know, is that factored in sort of the future and where we're looking at improvements?
At the moment, the way the accounts are being driven, and the way, certainly the way 25, 26 and 26 is being driven, 26, 27, is that we're at status quo, so we're not looking to build anything into that at the moment, and that's my understanding.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well.
Have you got any more questions, Councillor? No. I think Councillor Bales, then Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chair. And coming on to what we were talking about earlier, just on the Redditch railway station, from what I can see, that it's an unknown sewer located under the existing station. One, as an engineer, I find it difficult that we don't have plans to show an existing sewer under a railway station linking into the car park, so that I find difficult. And do we know what the cost of that is and the time delivery? Because until we can make a decision on the railway station, it'd be nice to have what the costs are. And again, with the contingencies along with that, is it eating into contingency or is it way beyond that? So there are a couple of questions there, and I'll come back later, Chair, on a few others, if that's okay.
Apologies on that. I'm going to have to come back to you in writing. The specifics I can't quite recall, so I'll come back to you in writing on that question.
Yes, yeah. And then just going on to the other railway schemes, because I noticed there that we've got coming forward, and again, I'll just say disappointed that I learned about this from leaks and into the press without us being told, that that's the progress at the railway accessibility improvements are part of the overall investment into railway schemes is going to change or be downgraded. The named stations, one of them is Old Church. I think somebody will come on to some of the other stations in there later, but there's, can I just ask the question is, what monies did we have in and what schemes did we have in for Old Church railway station? Because all I can work out is that it's in the LTP for the station car park to be improved, but I've seen no other work done into the accessibility into the station or the accessibility around the station or any monies associated with that. And I'll come back with some more.
I'm not sure you're going to be very pleased with this answer, but I'm going to have to come back to you with the detail in writing. Obviously, the last administration there was a programme of rail improvement that went across a number of our key stations, and they obviously started with those that have got the most in terms of footfall. But the specifics on Alfchurch, I'm not sure on at this point.
Can I therefore, Chair, ask that with the accessibility to the station, and we have a duty of care to our residents about being able to access the station, that they cannot get to the northbound platform when the lifts aren't working. There is a scheme which has been floated to Network Rail, which is a cost of 50,000.
Alan, we've already dealt with this.
Well,
we've heard this.
Well, I do, but I want to think about...
We don't need it twice. We took it in the other
Well,
item.
no, it's coming forward, Chair, with about taking some monies from some of the budgets of a small amount to deal with that issue. That's the bit I was going to ask for, Chair, within this.
Right.
Because obviously we've got railway schemes within there which are being reduced, but there's some more little monies where we can then put that into an old church budget, which we can then fulfil our duty of care to residents. So that's all I was going to ask, Chair.
Ultimately, I think that'd be a decision for the administration, won't it?
I think it's a recommendation to go forward, Chair. That's all I'm asking.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Allen.
Yes, thank you, Chair. You'll be pleased I'm not going to talk about railway stations. I'll shunt that to one side. Sorry. Yes.
Put it in the side.
Yeah, 50p in the box, please. Thank you. I'm more concerned, greatly concerned about highways and footways reduction in borrowing totaling £6 million. Where's that coming from, that borrowing?
So it's a reduction in the borrowing.
Yes. But what? How are you achieving it?
Less borrowing.
So it would just be less borrowing. Obviously, we have a grant in for highways and footpath maintenance, and that is increased by borrowing to provide more, so for the upper quartile. So that's just reducing that borrowing down, so that it will just be, there's still some borrowing there, but not to the extent that there has been previously.
Okay, which makes me suspect that things are being cut and therefore we don't have to borrow as much. So do we know if there are plans for the councillors' highways funding that we get each year to fund in our own areas? Is that going to be cut?
I'd have to defer to the member, I think.
Yeah, I think all options are being looked at.
Okay, I understood that perhaps was coming forward to Cabinet, and I'm surprised seeing we're getting the review here that isn't in here. But of course it would be a lot more helpful if the Cabinet member for that responsibility would bother to turn up.
I mean, putting it bluntly, ultimately, if we are borrowing less to fund capital schemes, there are going to be less pavements and less roads resurfaced, and there'll be less in the programme. And that is a political decision by the administration, and no doubt some of us will make that point at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Chair.
Chairman's prerogative, the Hampton Bridge, okay, the £6 million use of the local transport grant rather than borrowing. So what was the £6 million earmarked for prior to Hampton Bridge? Because effectively it's being vired, isn't it, if I've got that correct? So what are we not doing in order to fund it for Hampton Bridge?
So local transport grant was new this financial year, so it was new monies that came in. So instead of borrowing, we've used that new money to fund that.
But it wasn't specific to Hampton Bridge, was it?
No, it was just, yeah, it was just additional funds.
Sweeney, then Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. My apologies for labouring the point about what we've already been discussing. I mean, just to add to Councillor Allen's point, here there is a mention in the Cabinet briefing reports. I mean, I'll read what it says here. Full Council are requested to approve a variation to the capital programme to reduce the expenditure funding by borrowing by £2.5 million, etc. This removes the additional allocation of funding for local member schemes beyond that in the current year. So basically what it's saying here is that this is going to be removing the local members scheme for highways and footpaths. I mean, this is what I'm reading here. So just a clarification on that. I mean, I know the answer is you'll get back to me on this, but I mean, I also know to mention in here about the railway stations of relating to accessibility, and it mentions Rushwick railway station, which doesn't exist, and I'm not sure it is going to exist either, but thank you for that.
Any comments?
No,
No,
I'll just have to get back on that, or whether it'll be discussed on Thursday as to the full meaning behind that.
Okay. Councillor James.
Yeah, more of a comment than a question, so you can breathe a sigh of relief. But I think we do have to applaud colleagues in the council and officers as well that the overspend is just coming from our statutory obligations. That I think the public don't necessarily realise that the funding from central government is not cutting the mustard, that we are still, I notice here, you've got EHCP costs are still going up, and we're just not balancing that book, but that's not something we can choose to do. That's our statutory obligation. I think it has to be really sort of made clear, because I know the public out there think we're just choosing what to do, but so much of it that we're doing is the statutory obligation of why we're all here. So I think just to pass on the praise to the teams that are working in really tight circumstances to make sure we meet our statutory obligation.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, given you've identified the challenges that we've got as a wide organisation.
We're not alone. Any other comments or questions? No? In which case, thank you very much indeed, Sarah and Dave and Gary. And we'll turn to our final item, which is just the Scrutiny work programme. If you turn to the back page, page 45 of the agenda, we've got our meeting in November, haven't we? So I think what we just need to do, we've identified all of the work streams, and we just need to try and bring forward two of those forward to the November meeting. I don't know whether anybody's desperate to say which ones, or whether they'll just work with Sam and Martin.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think I requested this in July, and it was the economic challenges of town centres. But I think it's really the small town centres that I think is where we should be looking. I mean, the large town centres and the cities, I suspect you've already got most of the data, but the small town centres, I think is definitely where we need to sort of try and focus, if that's possible, please, Chair.
Okay, well, Gary, yep.
Some of that does rely on some of that is a district function, and some of it's a county function. So we might just want to think about whether that can come in November, or whether we just need to do a bit of work beforehand to work with our district colleagues to bring forward how that comes forward. But happy to take it on as an issue.
Is November doable, or is January more doable?
January would be better.
Let's have that definitely for January then, and that gives us something to work with. I would like us to see if we can get Shrub Hill Quarter development on the agenda for November. Is that possible, Gary?
It might be, January, yes. November, I might have to come back to you.
Okay. Well, should we take it, Martin?
Yes, sorry. So if I've also seen we've got support for small towns, and I wonder if you could tie that into the January meeting as well, because they would fit together, if that's okay, Chair.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think what we'll do is Sam and I work offline to liaise with Gary and see.
Don't forget January's budget scrutiny.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah. So January might be a busy meeting, so some might get bumped till March. But I'll work with Sam offline to get a couple of these items on the November agenda if everybody's okay. Councillor Bales.
Yes, Chair, just on that very point, support for small towns, can we define what they are and name them, I think, because obviously we're concerned we have a hierarchy settlement within Bromsgrove. We only have one town, that's Bromsgrove. We've got some large settlements in there in the hierarchy. Can we define what they are, Gary, if you may?
Yeah, okay. We'll put a definition around it, but where I think you've got the key, the largest town in each of the districts, we will kind of discount a little bit. That might be a challenge for Wychavon because you'll probably want to see the three, but nevertheless, we'll put a definition around it. And
is there a in terms of what's classed nationally as a small town? Is there some like population figure or what? Is there some?
I wasn't sure of at the top of my head. Some have got.
Just to help within our local plan at Bromsgrove, we have a settlement hierarchy.
I was about to say, there's
so that might help, but it's probably different with each district. But yeah, it might help with doing it that way, because there isn't any definition of a town or a village.
We'll come back with a definition to scope in the pre-work, and then perhaps we can agree that within you guys.
Good. Okay. Well, Sam and I will work offline to schedule some of these in for November and January. Good. Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, it's 5 to 3. So thank you all very much indeed. Thank you.